Now, the Duval Rundown, driven by Jacksonville Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram Westside, home of the lifetime warranty.
Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Duval Rundown. I'm Hayes Carline. Pleased to be joined by Frank Frangie, voice of the Jaguars and host of the Frangie Show. Frank, it's good to be with you on a Wednesday. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you and Ryan O'Halloran for being flexible. I had a little something Monday, so we appreciate the little swap, and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about this on the Frangie Show, but I thought it would be a fun topic for Duval Rundown, and that's sort of peeking ahead. We'll talk a little bit about the Super Bowl. I want to get your Super Bowl pick as we wrap up. But obviously not a ton of news Jaguars related. We've gone over the coordinator staying, and that was wonderful news. And obviously we're some time away from free agency and the moves and guys that they could be losing. So kind of a cool time to just kind of pause and take a peek forward at the AFC race going into 2026, because the Jaguars really seem well positioned to repeat what they have just done. Maybe not win 13 games, but certainly be right at the top of the AFC in terms of contention. Frank, how do you see it as we start to peak towards next year?
I think you're dead on, Hayes. I think in my 12 years of calling the games, and I've just completed my 12th year doing that, for the first time in my 12 years of calling the games, and the second time in the 31-year history of the franchise, and I've covered it the whole time, I think the Jags go into a season as one of the teams to beat in the conference. I don't think that's happened. I think it's happened twice. I don't think it happened in 23, even though they made the playoffs in 22. They were looked at as a good team, but certainly not. I don't think people were saying Super Bowl contender. I think after 17, when they almost made the Super Bowl, and probably should have, people expected them to be good in 18, but I didn't feel like necessarily Super Bowl contender, maybe outside contender. I felt that way in the 90s. You certainly knew in the Coughlin years that they were really good and they were going to be a Super Bowl contender most of that stretch the minute they got good. And I feel that way now. I think the momentum is such that not just us in Jacksonville, Hayes, I think nationally, people that cover the league are thinking about the Jags as one of the 2 or 3 teams that could get to the Super Bowl from the AFC, maybe one of the 3 or 4 teams. So that's what's exciting. I think it's very positive. They got the right coach. They've got the right quarterback. And when you have those 2 things figured out, a lot of other stuff falls into place. We've talked about it ad nauseum, I suppose, that the 3-headed monster of Tony Baselli, James Gladstone, and Liam Cohen is going to be here for a long time, and they seem to be the right guys. So I'm very excited about where I think this thing's headed, and I think that's the national narrative too, not just local.
Let's start with New England, because it's a unique situation. The AFC is loaded, yet the team that won the AFC, the New England Patriots, and maybe they'll upset Seattle and we'll feel differently come Sunday night, but I think Seattle's probably going to beat the Patriots. But let's start there. I mean, they are whatever happens Sunday, they're the defending AFC champion. Do you think New England has staying power? How big of a threat do you think the Patriots are to the Jaguars next year?
They certainly have staying power. They have a young base and a very young quarterback who's very good, and a coach who's regarded as one of the best in the league. So they've got staying power. But their run was interesting. I think Seattle's going to win too. I know we'll talk about the Super Bowl coming up in a bit, but I think Seattle's going to beat them too. Their run was interesting. There's 2 schools of thought on this year's Patriots. One is, look, they're 17-3. They have a quarterback who threw 31 touchdowns and 8 picks. They've got one of the best coaches in football. They've got a dynamic cover corner. They've got some really good players. Give them their props. They went 17-3 and won the AFC. Nothing more needs to be said. And I get that line of thinking. Hey, the other thought is they fell into an extremely easy schedule. They caught breaks along the way, not the least of which was Bo Nix couldn't even play in the championship game, which made the Patriots would certainly ease the way as well. So they're a really good team. 17-3, you've earned your stripes. At the same time, it's disingenuous not to notice that they got some breaks along the way. So both of those schools of thinking have some accuracy to them. I think they're pretty good. I think as you move forward and you look at the teams next year that are going to be in the hunt for the AFC, I said the Jaguars will. Certainly the Patriots will as well. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Who do you view then as we go into 20, and it might be the Jaguars, right. But I guess let's start with that. Make the case that the Jaguars, if you were going to, you may not feel this way, but if you did feel this way, is there a case to be made that the Jaguars might be the number one team in the AFC going into 2026.
You could certainly make the case. You and I did this on the radio show, and I had the Bills 1 and the Jags 2. The Bills, for me, I think Josh Allen is special. I know he didn't play as well in their elimination game as he did here, but I think he's special. And I think they got the coach right in Joe Brady. I think he's a very good coach. You've loved him. You are ahead of the curve on him. You wanted to see him get a head job well before he did, and I think you were right. I think Joe Brady's going to be really good. He knows the players too. He doesn't have to come learn anybody, right? He knows everybody there. He and Josh Allen have a great connection. I like the way he's built his staff. So I think the Bills would be 1 for me. The Jags right behind them. I think the Patriots are in the mix. I think the Broncos with a healthy Bo Nix obviously will be in the mix with that defense. I think the Texans, even though they really struggled offensively and C.J. Stroud struggled, I think that defense will keep them in the mix. But for me, I think the Jags are right there. So to your question, make the case. I think they've got as good a coach as there is in football in Liam Cohen. He's proven that. They've built a culture. They've proven they're very good at acquiring players. And I think they got the right quarterback. So I think the Jags are as good as any of them. But if I had to rank them, I would go Bills 1, Jags 2. And I'm not done with the Chiefs yet. You got to head off the snake, man.
Yeah.
They were down this year. A lot of funky stuff happened, and they've got to rebuild the roster. There's some holes. There's no question. But they've got Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. I don't think they're going anywhere. So for me, if I was doing it, it would be Bills 1, Jags 2, Chiefs 3, and then everybody else falls in line.
Interesting. Yeah, it's the Chiefs are really going to be interesting to see what they are able to do. It's hard to believe they have a top 10 draft pick, but I'm more out on the Chiefs, and obviously Mahomes is incredible. Andy Reid's incredible. Those guys should make the Hall of Fame one day if the voters, know what they're doing. We'll see. But in terms of the Chiefs, it's hard for me to see it. I just don't see any talent beyond Mahomes. They just haven't. Their stars are aging. Mahomes isn't, but you look at the stars of that roster are getting older, and they just haven't done a good job of bringing in new guys. You look at the guys on rookie contracts there. I mean, very few of them, I think, scare you, and so I think they sort of. And look, it doesn't help when you're drafting, 30 to 32nd. For basically 7 or 8 years. I mean, I understand it's going to be hard to win a lot of drafts when you're picking late, but the Chiefs, I think, they may be the most interesting team in the league next year to see whether they do bounce back strong. Because to your point, you couldn't be if they did go 14-3, you couldn't be stunned. They have arguably the greatest player of his generation, and obviously they have a wonderful coach in Andy Reid, but. I do like the Jaguars better than the Chiefs by a significant margin going into 2026. In terms of Buffalo, it's hard not to like the Bills. Although I will say their GM Brandon Beane, that does seem like that's got the potential, and I like Joe Brady, but boy, you saw like Brandon Beane yesterday, like with this crybaby, not press conference, but wherever he was on a podcast or did some interview, and I thought looked ridiculous in his comments. So that one seems a little like maybe they're a little too wound tight. We'll see. That's going to be a big task for Joe Brady to keep those guys, from not having some outside circumstances affect them. But certainly Josh Allen makes them incredibly formidable. Let's Jacob Simon's helping us out on Duval Rundown, which we certainly appreciate. Jacob, I'm going to get to the team that I think is the most dangerous in the AFC. But first, let's say hello to our sponsor, please.
Baloo for Jacksonville Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram Westside, your locally owned commercial truck headquarters and proud partner of the Jaguars. For hard-to-find ProMaster vans or commercial trucks for your fleet, visit jaxwest.com today.
I got to say that the team that concerns me the most in the AFC next year, and they have traditionally been underachievers, but maybe one year they're going to get it right. The Los Angeles Chargers, to me, are a team that is scary because they won 11 games this year with basically no offensive line. They if the guys are healthy, Rashawn Slater, the left tackle, they lose in training camp. Joe Alt, their outstanding right tackle, they lose very early in the season with an ankle. He misses about a month and a half, comes back, re-injures it, misses the rest of the year. So they basically didn't have. I mean, we're not talking 2 first-round tackles. We're talking 2 high in the top 10 drafted tackles that they didn't have all year. They still won 11 games. They didn't really have Amari, the talented rookie running back. Justin Herbert was playing phenomenal football for a while, and then just the constant beatings, caught up to him. And he broke his hand and had some other ailments, but Herbert was able to run more this year, which unlocked a different part of his game. And I like their weapons. They're not spectacular, but between McConkey and Quentin Johnston and Aronde Gadsden, we'll see if Keenan Allen returns. Jim Harbaugh, obviously a high-level coach, and defensively, the Chargers were good all year. So, Frank, they never can, but if the Chargers could ever stay healthy, boy, I think they would have, at least from a talent standpoint, and Jim Harbaugh is not going to mess it up. They seem to me that if they could have a year where they stay relatively injury-free, boy, they could have something special, but they're never able to do it. But I think 2026, adding Mike McDaniel as offensive coordinator, bringing that offense up to speed with where the NFL is, I think McDaniel and Herbert, boy, that's got a chance, I think, to be just a superstar connection. It only probably lasts 1 year, and McDaniel will get another job. But for 2026, I think the Chargers are very dangerous.
Yeah, you said that on our radio show too. And listen, all the pieces are there, including the coach and quarterback. But I haven't bought in yet. I've never bought in, and they're going to have to win me over more. If I bet you lunch, not much more than that, by the way, but I'd bet you lunch that the Chiefs finish ahead of them next year.
Okay, you're on.
Yeah, okay. I just read in Mahomes, and I want to go back to the Chiefs for a second, and I'll get to the Chargers in a second. I'll be very interested to see what Brett Veach does. I'll be very interested to see, as the years go on, how much of the player procurement was Mike Bergonzi and not just Veach, because he doesn't have Bergonzi anymore, as everyone knows. He's in Tennessee now. I think there's a fire and a burn to win in Kansas City, and I think in addition to Mahomes and Reed, that team knows how to win. I think the culture is about winning. They had a season get away from them this year, but I think there's something to that, and I think there's a fire that burns within them. So you got to cut the head off the snake. I don't think the Chargers have that. Now, maybe Jim Harbaugh can breathe that into them. He's a great coach. He's been to a Super Bowl in the NFL. He's won a championship in college. Justin Herbert certainly is skilled. He's got all the traits. So we'll see. But for me, I'm going to have to see it with the Chargers before I'm convinced of it. So now I think more people agree with you than me. People have them high. But if I did an AFC power poll, they'd be 5th or 6th for me. 4th or 5th, they wouldn't be ahead of that for me. So we'll see. That's what makes it fun, right?
Absolutely.
Here's one thing we do know about the NFL. What the New England Patriots and the Jacksonville Jaguars proved is you don't know. Nobody.
And Seattle.
And Seattle for sure.
Everybody thought Seattle would finish like 3rd in that division.
But nobody saw the Jags and the Patriots, who won 4 games last year.
Yeah.
It's 2 4-13 teams who had these brilliant seasons. The Jags won 13 regular season games. The Patriots are 17-3 and still playing. So there's no way of knowing. And by the way, nobody would have told you in the offseason, well, the Jags have a pretty good roster, or the Patriots have a pretty good roster. Nobody thought that. Nobody. Now you look back and you see, they're pretty good there and pretty good there. So you don't know, but it'll be fun. That's what we're talking about today. Makes this whole thing fun. The AFC is going to be very interesting because we haven't even talked about the Ravens. How will the Ravens be with Jesse Minter running the thing and with Lamar Jackson maybe refining himself? We haven't even talked about them. What does happen to the Texans, who are so good on defense, but boy, did C.J. Stroud look bad down the stretch, right? So there's so many storylines in the AFC. It'll be really fun to follow.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the North because they've sort of anchored the conversation. It's been the Chiefs and the Bills and the AFC North because they've just constantly produced teams that can get to the Super Bowl. Cincinnati's done it. Baltimore hasn't gotten to the Super Bowl, but has been consistent. Pittsburgh has been a tough out and won the North this year. But as I look at the North going into 2026, I don't believe in the Steelers at all. I think, I think they didn't have a losing record under Mike Tomlin for all those years. I think Mike McCarthy in year one, losing record. And it's nothing again. I just think they've been on the precipice of falling apart for like 4 years now. And I think finally the roof caves in. And, they I don't think they'll be terrible, but I think they might be like 6-11. Baltimore is interesting. They'd probably be the team that in that division I'd hang my hat on if somebody was going to seriously contend to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. Cincinnati, you love Burrow, you love the weapons. They can't stop anybody, and they can't protect Burrow. So it's hard to buy into them. Cincinnati's almost become a team that if you play them, you hope that game is in the second half of the season, because the odds that Burrow is going to be available by mid-October are slim to none. I mean, they haven't done a good job protecting him, to the point where he's questioned if he even wants to keep playing at times in press conferences, or at least, making cryptic statements about that he may not be long for Cincinnati. So I get, if I had to pick a team in the North, and Cleveland has no chance, it would be Baltimore. But I think it's like this year. I think that champion is the 4 seed and probably a home underdog that gets knocked out in the wild card round.
Well, 2 or 3 things. Cleveland won't factor. Todd Monk is a friend of mine. I hope he does well, but they're not going to factor. The Bengals, it's hard to count on them because of the injuries, the defense. They don't spend money, so they're one of the cheaper teams. So I hear you. The Bengals, the Ravens will always be in play because they've got Lamar, and Lamar is a special player. If you win Most Valuable Player in the National Football League, you're a special player, and they can always be in play. You don't know what they'll do defensively, but they brought in a defensive head coach. And the Steelers are either going to be much better or much worse. They're not going to be the same, because their whole thinking with Mike McCarthy is, listen, we've been good on defense for all these years. We've been lousy on offense. Let's bring in, for the first time ever, for the first time since the 60s, a head coach who's offensive-minded, who's calling his own plays, and either that'll be a stroke of genius because he'll unlock the offense to go with that defense, or it'll be an unmitigated disaster. And to your point, they'll win 5 or 6 games. So we'll see what happens there. But I agree with you. The North doesn't scare you. It really doesn't. It's good. And again, I don't know what to make. I don't know what to make of teams other than New England and Buffalo and in the East. We have our conversations about the West. That's very interesting. And I think the Jags are going to win the South without much question. So, but the AFC is going to be interesting. It's going to be fun to watch. There's a lot of – and listen, you're right about Seattle. I don't pay as much attention to the NFC. I probably should, right? But I don't play fantasy, so I don't I don't pay attention to every game like the fantasy players do. So I don't follow. I think the NFC is good. I think the Rams and the Seahawks are the 2 best teams this year. But the AFC is going to be terribly interesting. I can't wait for it to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think Houston will be second in the South, but I would think the Jaguars will be able to repeat as division champion, not in a runaway, but I would think that they'd win, by a game or 2, win the division. I think Houston will be, that defense will still be very good. But yeah, CJ Stroud, it's hard to have a lot of faith in where his career is going right now. Give us a Super Bowl thought. What kind of game do you think we see on Sunday?
I thought the Rams and the Seahawks all year long were the 2 best teams in the league. Even with all due respect to the 49ers, that's 3 really good teams in one division. I thought the Rams and the Seahawks were the 2 best teams in the league. I think the Seahawks are really good. I think they're going to roll the Patriots. I think the 4.5 is not a big enough number. I think this one's 34-17, 34-21. I think the Seahawks have by far the better team. And I think they're going to win the game somewhat easily. Me having said that, now the Patriots are going to win, right? Because the minute I call that out, the way it kind of tends to go. But I hope it's a good game. I hope it's a close game. I went back and forth on who I'm going to root for. I don't know. You made a good point on our show. Sometimes you go in not rooting for anybody. You just start rooting for somebody once the game starts. I admire what the Patriots have done. I like Vrabel. I think he's a really good coach. I still can't believe Tennessee fired Mike Vrabel. What in the world? I still can't believe Tennessee fired Mike Vrabel. So they'd be a fun team to root for if they weren't an AFC rival, but they are. And the more momentum they get by winning, the more that hurts the Jaguars moving forward. So I probably need Seattle to win that game. But my belief is Seattle's going to win the game comfortably. We'll see.
Yeah, I like Seattle by double digits too. I think it's going to be a kind of a snoozer. I think both defenses are going to win the day, but I think Seattle will win their matchup with New England's offense a little bit more one sided. So I think it could be like 20-10. Seattle. Like I mean, I'm not expecting much, but maybe that's good. Maybe that means that we'll all be wildly entertained by a thrilling game. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Hard to believe that the Super Bowl is upon us, but don't worry, we'll be a couple weeks away from the combine. And while we know the Jags won't be overly invested in that kind of stuff, it's still fun for us to look at prospects that we like, to start to match who the Jaguars might be looking at with those 11 draft picks. Again, 1 second round pick, but then 3 in the third. So that Friday night after the first round of the draft, that's going to be James Gladstone night. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see how Gladstone maneuvers around and who he ends up selecting. Because again, third round pick, I mean, that's a player that can step in and play right away. And he's got a second and 3 threes. So going to be exciting to see. But Frank, we certainly appreciate it. Great stuff. And we'll look forward to talking with you later on the Frangie Show.
One point before you sign off, I do want to say that you're right about the draft's going to be great. I can't wait for free agency this year, Hayes.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a first round pick. You've proven that they're going to go get a bunch of players. Now they're not going to go get that A-list guy probably, but if you think of what how free agency affected this past season, Hainsey, McCary, Eric Murray, Jordan Lewis, De'Ami Brown didn't work out, but they took a run at him, right? If you look at what they did in free agency this year, that's kind of the sleeping giant. Everyone talks about the draft, you know what I mean? But if you don't have a first round pick, they've got to improve some defensive areas. We all know that. I think free agency is going to be a lot of fun too. I can't wait for that to start.
Absolutely. It'll be here before we know it. That's going to do it for us. Thanks for watching Duval Rundown. We will be back on Friday with Rick Ballou. Until then, enjoy your day. Go Jags.